the silence dark, whispers in the midnight park. The night is cold, there's no escape. Ghostly figures take their shape.
Welcome back to Real Talk Horror Edition, the podcast where we explore the twisted, unsettling, and sometimes outright terrifying corners of cinema. I'm your host Josh, and I'm thrilled to have you join me tonight as we continue our deep dive into psychological horror in our first series, Mind Games and Madness, a curated collection of films that challenge the boundaries of reality, delve into the darkest corners of the mind, and force us to question what we believe to be true. This is film 5 of 7 in this part of the series, and tonight's feature is one that sparked a lot of curiosity upon its release, The Number 23. Directed by the late Joel Schumacher, known for his visual flair and eclectic filmography, and starring the incomparable Jim Carrey in one of his rare dramatic roles, this film had all the ingredients for a psychological thriller masterpiece. A compelling premise, a unique numerical obsession, and an actor stepping out of his comedic comfort zone. What could go wrong? Well, as it turns out, unfortunately, quite a bit. While The Number 23 had the potential to be a mind-bending exploration of paranoia, delusion, and the thin line between genius and madness, it unfortunately missed the mark in several ways. That said, there's still a lot to unpack. The film's atmosphere, Carrey's performance, and the intriguing concept of a number controlling someone's life are worth examining, even if the execution leaves something to be desired. So grab your notebooks, start tallying those digits, and let's see if this puzzle of paranoia and delusion was worth piecing together, or if it's a mystery better left unsolved in the shadows. Buckle up, because this one's going to be a wild, albeit flawed, ride. The Number 23, directed by Joel Schumacher and written by Fernley Phillips, is a psychological thriller that explores the dangerous power of obsession and the human mind's capacity for self-destruction. At the center of the story is Walter Sparrow, a seemingly ordinary animal control officer whose life takes a dark turn when he discovers a mysterious novel. The book, also titled The Number 23, is a cryptic tale filled with murder, madness, and conspiracy, and it seems to mirror Walter's own life in unsettling ways. The crux of the film revolves around the titular 23, a number that appears everywhere Walter looks, on clocks, addresses, birthdays, and even in the sum of random letters and words. It begins to consume him, driving him deeper into a web of paranoia and delusion. As Walter's obsession with the number grows, his grasp on reality weakens, lending him and the audience onto a journey to uncover hidden truths about the book, the number, and ultimately himself. When I first heard about The Number 23, I was genuinely intrigued. I love Jim Carrey, and to see him taking on a serious and sinister role piqued my interest. Known for his comedic genius, Carrey stepping into the realm of psychological horror promised something bold and different. And with Joel Schumacher, a director who has given us both visually striking and emotionally resonant films, I expected a story that would keep me on the edge of my seat, questioning every clue and twist. The premise sounded like it was tailor-made for fans of films like The Sixth Sense or Memento, maybe a little stir of echoes. Stories that keep you guessing while diving into the fragile nature of the human psyche. But does it deliver? Well, that's where things get a bit murky. While the film here does present moments of intrigue and tension, it struggles under the weight of its own ambition, ultimately falling short of the mind-mending masterpiece it aspired to be. Still, there's something compelling about this core idea, a number that seems to hold the key to everything, unraveling a man's life in the process. So let's dive deeper and see where the number 23 succeeds, where it stumbles, and where it manages to leave a lasting impression. Let's unravel the thematic and psychological threads woven into the number 23, where the film's ambitions occasionally outpace its execution. The number 23 explores the consuming nature of obsession. Walter Sparrow's descent into madness is triggered by his own fixation on that titular number. And it's fascinating and tragic to watch him become both the victim and the architect of his unraveling. This isn't a story of external manipulation. Instead, this is a deep dive into self-manipulation. Walter convinces himself that the number 23 is everywhere, guiding his every thought and decision. The way he pieces together seemingly random coincidences to fit his narrative creates a compelling portrait of a man trapped in his own mind. Unfortunately, the film occasionally over-explains this dynamic, robbing it of some of its subtlety. A bit more restraint in revealing Walter's thought process could have elevated the psychological tension. Perception versus reality is where the film conceptually shines. As Walter dives deeper into the novel, the lines between fiction and reality blur in increasingly disturbing ways. The parallels between the book and his life are so intricate and bizarre that even us in the audience are left questioning what's real and what's imagined. This element taps into a classic hallmark of psychological horror: the idea that our perception can be our greatest enemy. Unfortunately, while the concept is strong, the execution is a bit uneven. The film gives us moments where we're genuinely unsure of what's happening. Walter's paranoia becomes our own, but it doesn't sustain the unease throughout. The potential for a mind-bending narrative is there, but the film falters by leaning too heavily on exposition instead of letting the mystery unravel naturally. Jim Carrey's portrayal of Walter Sparrow is one of the film's highlights. As we all know, he is a comedic mastermind, but Carrey's turn as a man spiraling into paranoia is both unexpected and intriguing. He brings such a physical sense of vulnerability to Walter, making his descent into madness feel personal. Unfortunately, the script doesn't fully allow him to explore the psychological depths that could have made this transformation truly resonant. Walter's paranoia and obsession are clear, but the lack of nuance in the storytelling prevents his journey from feeling as impactful as it could have been. Carrey does what he can, but the film doesn't give him enough room to make Walter's inner turmoil as haunting as it should be. The concept of the number 23 as an omnipresent, almost supernatural force had the potential also to be deeply unsettling. Numbers are universal, they're inescapable, which makes the idea of one holding a power, this sinister power, inherently chilling. Unfortunately, the film squanders this potential by over-explaining the phenomenon. Instead of allowing the number to remain an enigmatic force that lingers in the shadows of Walter's mind and ours, the film falls into the trap of formulaic paranoia. The repeated instances of 23 appearing in Walter's life are presented in such a heavy-handed manner that they lose any impact. The fear of the unknown becomes less about the possibility of something sinister and more about ticking boxes in a checklist of coincidences. Thematically, the number 23 has all the ingredients for a gripping psychological exploration. It taps into universal fear of losing control of our minds, blurring the lines between reality and delusion. However, while the film sets the stage for a deep, thought-provoking experience, it doesn't quite deliver on its promises. The ideas are there, but the execution feels rushed and uneven, and it leaves us with a sense of what could have been rather than what actually is. The atmosphere and tone of the number 23 plays a significant role in shaping our experience. Joel Schumacher's visual and auditory choices are bold and deliberate, reflecting Walter's psychological descent while trying to immerse us in this unraveling reality. While there are moments where these elements shine, the overall execution occasionally falters, leaving the experience feeling uneven. Schumacher here employs a dark, saturated palette to mirror Walter's growing obsession and descent into madness. Shadows dominate many scenes, often creeping into corners and enveloping the characters, symbolizing Walter's mind being taken over by the paranoia of the number. The color grading leans heavily into blues, blacks, and those muted tones, giving the film this perpetually overcast and uneasy mood. A standout element is the way the film visually differentiates between Walter's reality and the fictional world of the book. The flashbacks to the book's story adopt a starkly distinct noir-inspired aesthetic, complete with high-contrast lighting, exaggerated angles, and dramatic, almost surreal visuals. These sequences are visually striking, and they succeed in creating a sense of disconnection from the real world. However, the transitions between these two styles can feel abrupt and jarring. Instead of smoothly integrating Walter's delusions with his reality, the film creates a sense of fragmentation that occasionally disrupts the narrative flow. While this may have been intentional to reflect Walter's fractured state of mind, it sometimes comes across as unpolished rather than purposeful. The film score, composed by Harry Gregson Williams, adds a haunting layer to the atmosphere. It features ominous, brooding tones that underscore Walter's paranoia and intensify moments of tension. However, there are times when the score feels heavy-handed, almost dictating how we should feel, instead of subtly enhancing the mood. In scenes where silence or understated music could have amplified the psychological tension, the score instead overwhelms, pulling focus from the narrative. The sound design also aims to heighten the tension, using abrupt shifts and jarring noises to reflect Walter's increasingly erratic mental state. For instance, the sharp sounds often accompany revelations or moments of panic, mimicking the chaotic way that Walter perceives the world around him. While effective in small doses, the technique becomes overused and diminishes its impact as the film progresses. There's a fine line between unsettling and overstimulating, and unfortunately the sound design here occasionally crosses into the latter territory. Then the suburban backdrop serves as a stark contrast to the dark psychological themes of the story. Walter's world initially feels ordinary and grounded. His job as an animal control officer, his family life, and his suburban home all paint a picture of normalcy. This normalcy is quickly disrupted, though, as the story unfolds. The film makes excellent use of confined, claustrophobic spaces to amplify Walter's unraveling. His home becomes a battleground for his obsession, with the walls seemingly closing in as he scrawls numbers and connections on every available surface. The cluttered interiors, dim lighting, and overwhelming presence of the number 23 create an oppressive atmosphere that really does mirror Walter's mental state. Another notable setting is the hotel room featured in the book's flashbacks. With its cold, noir-inspired design and eerie emptiness, it serves as a physical manifestation of the paranoia and detachment Walter begins to feel in his own life. These spaces are symbolic of Walter's isolation, both physically and mentally, and help to drive home the psychological tension. The atmosphere and tone of the number 23 are ambitious, and at times they effectively immerse us in Walter's unraveling psyche. Schumacher's visual choices, from the stark noir flashbacks to the oppressive suburban interiors, work very well to convey the film's themes. However, it's the transitions between these elements and the heavy-handed approach to sound and music prevent the atmosphere from achieving its full potential. While the film creates moments of genuine unease, it struggles to maintain a consistent tone, and it leaves us with glimpses of brilliance in an otherwise uneven execution. The characters in the number 23 play a critical role in driving the psychological tension and unraveling the story's mysteries. While some elements of their portrayal shine, the uneven execution of character arcs leaves us with a mix of intrigue and frustration. Let's dive deeper into the protagonist, antagonist, and supporting cast to better understand their roles in this psychological thriller. Walter Sparrow, played by Jim Carrey, is the film's heart, a man whose seemingly mundane life spirals into chaos as he becomes consumed by the number. Walter's journey is a case study in obsession. Initially, he is skeptical and dismissive of the book that his wife gives him. But curiosity soon gives way to paranoia, and he starts to see connections between the number 23 and every aspect of his life. Carrey's performance is layered, showing glimmers of his comedic charm that he's known for, while diving into the darker aspects of Walter's psyche. His portrayal of Walter's growing anxiety and desperation is compelling, particularly in scenes where he confronts the inexplicable coincidence surrounding the number. Yet the script's lack of subtlety limits the depth of the character arc. Instead of gradually unraveling, Walter's descent often feels rushed and overly dramatic, missing the opportunity to fully explore the psychological intricacies of the obsession. One of the film's most compelling ideas, that Walter's greatest antagonist may be himself. His growing obsession forces him to confront buried memories and darker truths about his past. While this dual role as both hero and villain is intriguing, the execution leaves much to be desired, often spoon-feeding revelations to us rather than letting them unfold naturally. Now, the villain of the story is multifaceted. On the surface, it appears to be the number 23, a pervasive force that seems to have a sinister influence on Walter's life. But as the story progresses, it becomes clear that the true antagonist is Walter's obsession. The number serves as a psychological mirror, reflecting his deepest fears, insecurities, and guilt. This duality is a fascinating concept. The number's omnipresence feels supernatural, an unstoppable force that Walter cannot escape. Yet the film reveals that its power lies in Walter's perception of it. The more he believes in its influence, the more it consumes him. This self-inflicted torment positions Walter as both the protagonist and his own worst enemy, a compelling twist on the traditional hero-villain dynamic. Unfortunately, the execution of this idea doesn't fully capitalize on its potential. The film leans heavily on exposition to explain the number's significance, stripping away much of the mystery and tension that could have made the antagonist more impactful. We are told, rather than shown, why the number is so dangerous, which diminishes its psychological weight. Virginia Madsen's portrayal of Agatha, Walter's wife, brings a grounded, calming presence to the chaos. Agatha serves as the voice of reason, initially dismissing Walter's obsession as harmless and trying to steer him back toward reality. However, as Walter's paranoia deepens, Agatha becomes increasingly concerned. Though her attempt to intervene often falls flat due to the script's underdevelopment of her character, Agatha has the real potential to be a compelling counterbalance to Walter's unraveling, but she's largely relegated to a reactive role. Her motivations and inner thoughts are never fully explored, leaving her character feeling underutilized. This is a missed opportunity, as her perspective could have added layers of emotional depth to the story, particularly in scenes where she grapples with Walter's transformation. Logan Lerman, playing Walter's son Robin, is another character who could have been more fleshed out. Robin represents the collateral damage of Walter's obsession, but his role is limited to a handful of interactions that lack significant emotional impact. The film hints at the strain Walter's paranoia places on his family, but it never really dives into these dynamics, which could have added a richer, more personal layer to the psychological horror. So the number 23 offers a fascinating concept for its characters, particularly in Walter Sparrow's dual role as protagonist and antagonist. Jim Carrey's performance captures the intensity of Walter's obsession, but the script's heavy-handedness undermines the character's depth. Similarly, the supporting cast, while well acted, is underdeveloped, serving more as plot devices than fully realized characters. The psychological horror of the number 23 ultimately rests on Walter's shoulders. While his unraveling provides moments of genuine tension, the film misses the opportunity to explore his relationships and inner turmoil, with the menace needed or the nuance needed to elevate the story. With more subtlety and attention to character dynamics, the number 23 could have delivered a truly chilling exploration of obsession and self-destruction. The number 23 is a film that attempts to weave deep psychological and existential themes into its narrative, using recurring imagery and motifs to drive home its unsettling atmosphere. However, while the potential for rich symbolism is evident, the execution often falls short, leaving the subtext feeling underdeveloped and at times superficial. Let's explore the film's visual metaphors, psychological symbolism, and its attempt, though not entirely successful, at social commentary. One of the film's most striking elements is the omnipresence of the number 23. It's everywhere. As we mentioned, it's in clocks, it's in license plates, phone numbers, random sequences of letters. This omnipresence is meant to create a sense of paranoia, reinforcing the idea that Walter is being consumed by an unavoidable, malevolent force. At first, these appearances of the number are subtle enough to be intriguing. They invite us to join Walter in his search for meaning, planting seeds of doubt about whether the number's influence is real or imagined. However, as the film progresses, the use of the number becomes increasingly heavy-handed. Rather than unsettling or thought-provoking, it begins to feel like a gimmick. Less a harbinger of doom and more a checklist of places where 23 can be crammed into the frame. Had the film taken a more restrained approach, allowing us to discover the significance of the number alongside Walter, these visual metaphors might have carried more weight. Instead, their overuse detracts from the tension, making the number feel less like a haunting presence and more like an overused plot device. The number 23 is a representation of Walter's subconscious guilt. As he continues to dive deeper into the mystery, it becomes clear that the number isn't just an external force. It is a manifestation of his inner turmoil. The obsession with 23 reflects Walter's struggle to reconcile with his past, a past he has repressed so deeply that it resurfaces only through his fixation on the number. This concept has incredible potential. The idea that Walter is both the victim and creator of his own torment is rich with psychological depth. The number 23 could symbolize many things: his repressed guilt, his fractured psyche, or even humanity's innate need to find patterns and meaning in chaos. Unfortunately, the film doesn't capitalize on these possibilities. Instead of allowing us to interpret the symbolism, the narrative spells it out, leaving little room for ambiguity or personal reflection. The psychological unraveling of Walter's character is fascinating in theory, but the lack of any subtlety in its execution diminishes its impact. Now, on a broader level, the number 23 hints at themes of obsession and how it can erode one's sense of reality. Walter's journey serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of fixating on patterns and coincidences, particularly when they begin to consume one's life. In today's world of conspiracy theories and internet rabbit holes, the film's premise feels eerily relevant. However, the film stops short of exploring these ideas in depth. It flirts with questions about the human need for meaning, the fragility of the mind, and the social consequences of unchecked obsession, but it never commits to fully developing these themes. As a result, the commentary feels surface level, a missed opportunity to connect Walter's personal descent into madness with larger societal or existential concerns. The number 23 had all the ingredients for a richly symbolic and thought-provoking psychological thriller. The visual metaphors, particularly the omnipresence of the number, and the psychological symbolism tied to Walter's guilt, provide a solid foundation. But the film's lack of subtlety and unwillingness to dive deeply into its themes leave much of its symbolism feeling shallow. The potential for deeper social or cultural commentary is present but underexplored. With a more restrained approach and a willingness to trust its audiences to draw their own conclusions, the number 23 could have delivered a more profound exploration of obsession, guilt, and the human psyche. Instead, it offers tantalizing glimpses at depth without ever fully committing, leaving the symbolism and subtext as yet another missed opportunity. When it comes to psychological horror, pacing and plot structure are crucial elements that can make or break the tension. Unfortunately, the number 23 struggles with maintaining a consistent rhythm, ultimately undermining its ability to deliver the psychological impact it aims for. Let's break this down by examining the film's slow burn beginnings, its twists and turns, and its polarizing conclusion. The film's pacing starts with promise. The first act unfolds as a slow burn, methodically drawing us into Walter Sparrow's world. We're introduced to his ordinary life as an animal control officer, his loving relationship with his wife Agatha, and the seemingly innocuous discovery of the mysterious book. There's a sense of intrigue as Walter's interest in the book turns into mild curiosity, then full-blown obsession. At this stage, the slow pacing works, allowing us to get pulled into Walter's psychological descent right alongside him. However, the slow burn doesn't last. By the time the second act kicks in, the film shifts into overdrive, abandoning the careful build-up for a chaotic rush of revelations and plot twists. Instead of letting the tension simmer, the narrative becomes frenetic, trying to cram far too much into too little. This shift not only feels jarring, but also diminishes the psychological impact of Walter's unraveling. What begins as a story steeped in mystery devolves into a convoluted sequence of events that feels more frustrating than thrilling. Twists are a staple of psychological horror, and the number 23 certainly delivers its fair share. The problem lies not in the number of twists, but in their execution. The film's twists are designed to shock, but most of them are telegraphed well in advance, making them feel more predictable than surprising. The central revelation, Walter's personal connection to the book, should have been a jaw-dropping moment. Instead, it feels contrived, the result of a narrative trying too hard to tie its threads together. The breadcrumbs leading to this twist are either too obvious or too conveniently placed, robbing us of the satisfaction of piecing it together ourselves. As a result, the twists, while integral to the plot, lack the psychological punch needed to elevate the story. A psychological horror film's ending can often be its defining moment, the point at which everything clicks into place or unravels entirely. In the case of the number 23, the ending attempts to do both. It seeks to tie up loose ends while maintaining an air of ambiguity, but it doesn't quite succeed on either front. The resolution is almost too neat, especially for a film that spends so much time exploring the chaos and unpredictable nature of obsession and madness. Walter's journey of self-discovery, while theoretically satisfying, feels rushed and overly simplified. Instead of leaving us with lingering questions or a sense of unease, the ending wraps things up in a way that undermines the psychological tension that the film had worked to establish. That's not to say the ending is without merit. It does offer a sense of closure, particularly for Walter's character, and it ties back to the themes of guilt and redemption. But in doing so, it sacrifices the haunting ambiguity that defines some of the best psychological thrillers. The pacing and plot structure of the number 23 are a mixed bag. The film starts strong with a compelling slow burn setup, but its rushed second half and predictable twists dilute the tension. The ending, while providing closure, feels too tidy for a film that should leave us questioning what's real and what's imagined. The number 23 is a film that tries to juggle too many ideas at once, and the pacing reflects that. With a more consistent rhythm and a greater focus on building psychological tension, it could have been a standout film. Instead, it feels like a missed opportunity, an intriguing concept that gets lost in its own tangled web. A film's impact and legacy are often measured by how it influences its genre, resonates with audiences, and stands the test of time. For the number 23, these elements are as complex as its plot, offering glimpses of potential while ultimately falling short of greatness. Let's unpack its place in psychological horror, its audience reception, and the niche following it has managed to cultivate. When the number 23 was released in 2007, psychological horror was undergoing a transformation. Films like Donnie Darko, The Machinist, and though not horror but still great psychology, in Memento, had all set a high bar for stories that blurred the lines between reality and delusion. In this context, the number 23 had all the ingredients to be a genre-defining entry. It attempted to weave a narrative filled with paranoia, guilt, and existential dread, all hallmarks of psychological horror. However, its execution left much to be desired. Rather than elevating the genre, the film became a cautionary tale about the dangers of prioritizing style over substance. Director Joel Schumacher's signature flair is evident in the film's visuals, but the focus on aesthetics often detracts from the narrative depth needed to sustain psychological tension. That said, the film does attempt to center a story on numerical obsession and its psychological consequences is a unique concept that deserves recognition. It might not have influenced the genre directly, but it does highlight the potential for exploring unconventional fears, like the fear of patterns and coincidences, as a source of horror. When it hit the theaters, the number 23 was met with widespread criticism. Critics largely panned the film for its convoluted plot, heavy-handed symbolism, and wildly inconsistent tone. Many felt the story collapsed under the weight of its ambition, with its twists and turns feeling more like a forced gimmick than an organic unraveling of the narrative. Though Jim Carrey's performance did garner some praise, because known primarily for his comedic roles at the time, Carrey's portrayal of Walter Sparrow marked a significant departure from his usual fare. While the script didn't always do his performance justice, his commitment to portraying a man spiraling into madness was evident. For some, this shift was enough to make the film worth watching, even if the overall execution left much to be desired. From an audience perspective, the reception was equally mixed. Some viewers appreciated the film's bold premise and Carrey's dramatic turn, while others found it frustrating and underwhelming. Its divisive nature has made it more of a curiosity than a beloved staple in the psychological horror genre. Over the years, the number 23 has developed a small cult following, though it's a far cry from achieving the kind of devoted fan base seen with other psychological thrillers. Its niche appeal lies primarily with fans of Jim Carrey, who are curious to see him tackle a darker, more serious role, and with those who are fascinated by the 23 enigma. The film's exploration of the 23 phenomenon, the idea that the number appears with uncanny frequency in life, has intrigued some viewers, especially those drawn to numerology and conspiracy theories. This element of the film gives it a unique hook, even if the execution falters. For these fans, the number 23 serves as an entry point into the world of numerical coincidences, sparking discussion and debates about the meaning, or lack thereof, behind the pattern. However, its limited depth and uneven storytelling prevent it from achieving true cult classic status. Cult films often resonate because they offer layers of meaning, subversive themes, or an offbeat charm that keeps audiences coming back. While the number 23 has its moments, it lacks the staying power to truly embed itself in the hearts of genre enthusiasts. The number 23 will stand as a film that aimed high but fell short. Its impact on the genre is minimal, but it remains a fascinating case study in how bold ideas can falter in execution. The audience's mixed reception reflects the film's uneven quality, and its small cult following underscores its status as a niche curiosity rather than any kind of genre-defining work. So it didn't have any sort of lasting legacy. The number 23 is still worth a watch for those of you interested in seeing Jim Carrey step out of that comedic comfort zone, or exploring the eerie possibilities of numerical obsession. It may not be the cornerstone of psychological horror, but it's a film that does spark conversation, and that in itself is a legacy worth noting. The number 23 is a film that on paper seems to promise a gripping psychological horror experience. With a talented director like Joel Schumacher at the helm and a star like Jim Carrey stepping into darker, more dramatic territory, It has all the ingredients for something truly unsettling. The concept of obsession with the number 23, paired with themes of paranoia and guilt, offers plenty of potential for mind-bending exploration of the human psyche. Unfortunately, despite these promising elements, the film falls short, undone by its own ambitions. One of the film's standout strengths is undoubtedly Jim Carrey's performance. Carrey takes on a role that's far removed from his usual comedic persona. His portrayal of a man losing his grip on reality is both eerie and compelling. Carrey effectively conveys Walter's descent into madness, from his initial skepticism to his growing paranoia. His commitment to this role shows that he can handle serious, dramatic material with the same intensity as his comedic work. While the script doesn't always allow his performance to fully shine, there's no denying that his portrayal is one of the most engaging aspects of the film. The film's visual style also deserves some recognition. Schumacher's direction brings a dark, noir-inspired aesthetic that complements the psychological tension. The use of shadows, stark lighting, and saturation of colors helps to create an atmosphere that feels both ominous and claustrophobic. The transitions between Walter's real world and the world depicted in the novel are visually distinct, with these shifts often using a retro, almost dreamlike style. These stylistic choices enhance the feeling of disorientation, which is crucial in psychological horror. However, as effective as these visuals are at setting the tone, they also contribute to one of the film's major weaknesses: its lack of clarity and cohesion. The plot, while intriguing in its premise, is weighed down by convoluted narrative choices and uneven pacing. The film starts off slow, with a slow burn that builds up Walter's obsession. But by the second half, it's rushing to fit in too many plot twists and revelations, making the narrative feel forced and overly complicated. The twists are meant to shock, but they often come across as predictable. And by the time they hit, we're already lost in the fog of the film's narrative missteps. The lack of subtlety is in both the plot and character development prevents the film from reaching the psychological depth that it obviously aspires to. The themes of obsession and blurring of reality versus fiction are powerful, but they're never fully realized, leaving us more frustrated than engaged. The real missed opportunity here is if the film had taken more time to explore the psychological impact of Walter's obsession, diving deeper into his past, his psyche, and the gradual unraveling of his mind, it could have been far more impactful. Instead, the story feels rushed and clumsy, with too much emphasis on the mystery of the number 23, and not enough on the emotional and psychological journey of the protagonist. Ultimately, the number 23 is a film that promises a lot, but doesn't quite deliver. It's a visual and conceptual experiment that never fully reaches its potential. Jim Carrey's performance, though captivating, is ultimately undercut by a script and direction that doesn't allow the film to achieve the level of psychological horror it could have had. My personal rating for the number 23 is a 4 out of 10. While there are certainly elements worth appreciating, the performances, the style, and the ideas, ultimately the film doesn't come together in a way that makes it a standout in the psychological horror genre. So would I recommend it? If you're a diehard fan of Jim Carrey's dramatic work, or if you're fascinated by films that attempt to explore psychological obsession, then yes, the number 23 might be worth a watch. However, don't expect a masterpiece. For those seeking more refined psychological thriller, there are plenty of other films that tackle similar themes with more finesse and subtlety. In my opinion, this film would probably be best suited as a limited series on a channel like HBO or Showtime. So now I just want to thank you for tuning in to Real Talk Horror Edition. I hope this deep dive into the number 23 has given you some insight into both the potential and the pitfalls of psychological horror. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit the subscribe so you don't miss out on any episodes. And if you would, leave me a review. Your feedback helps the show grow and reach more horror fans like you. Also, don't forget to join the conversation on social media, on Instagram and Threads at Real Talk. What did you think of the number 23? I'd love to hear your thoughts on the film. Did you find the number obsession compelling? Or did you get lost in its twists? Next time on Real Talk Horror Edition, we're going to dive into a cult classic, a true cult classic, 2001's Donnie Darko. A film that expertly blends psychological horror with mind-bending sci-fi. It's a film that'll stick with you, and I can't wait to explore it right beside you. Until then, stay spooky, and remember, sometimes the scariest thing is what's lurking inside your own mind. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Into the silence dark, whispers in the midnight park. The night is cold, there's no escape. Ghostly figures take their shape. Others play a twisted game. Fear and terror stake their claim. Footsteps follow close behind. Haunting thoughts invade your mind. Run away, but they won't go. In the darkness, fear will grow. Midnight shadows come to play. In your dreams, they'll always stay. Windows rattle, doors they creak. Ghostly whispers start to speak. Every corner hides a fear. Close your eyes, they're drawing near. Candles flicker, spirits